Today, there are more than 30 of you, elected leaders from across the country, that will be joining us. Stay standing. We'll be fast, I promise. Stand if you work for or have volunteered with another South Asian-led organization that is presenting today. All right. Today, we have more than 25 organizations and 75 presenters representing every country of origin in South Asia. Stand if you are an impact sponsor or have contributed to support our efforts in the past. Many, many thanks for making this possible. Stay standing. Stand if you work for the Biden-Harris administration, a member of Congress, or in public service. All right. Stand if this is your first summit. All right, let's give our first-timers a round of applause. All right, stand, and this should capture everyone. If you believe that representation matters, that the right to vote is sacred, and that we all have a role to play in building a stronger, more inclusive democracy, and that progress can only be attained if we move in lockstep with our brothers and sisters from other marginalized communities. All right, you may sit. Good news, you are in the right place. Welcome to Impact Summit. Our hope today is that when you leave, you feel inspired and connected, and I have only one homework assignment for you, but that is to exchange contact information with at least 3 new people, because this is about building our network. I'm going to hand it over to our new president, or not new, our president, Neil Makhija, in just a second, but I do want to give an overview of what you are doing today. So most of this afternoon, we will be spent in breakout sessions. So we did a call for proposals. We received dozens of submissions, and we are so excited that this is really, truly the most inclusive summit to date. There are 4 tracks: running for office, policy advocacy, community organizing, and activism through art. The program is in your tote bag. We'll also have it up here. There is a QR code on that 2-page program, so if you want to see the full digital program booklet with the session descriptions, you just scan that QR code. One quick note, our presenters, right, there are 75 of y'all, put a lot of time and thought into their sessions, and so I want to first thank you all for the time and energy you put into that. And also ask that all of our attendees show them the utmost respect. So this means, please show up. We're not trying to be on Desi Standard Time. Sessions are going to start on time. Please approach the day with an open mind, ready to learn, and be respectful in your tone. At 4 o'clock, you're going to come back here after sessions, and we have a fantastic closing session that you don't want to miss with Valerie Carr, Mayor Aftab Puraval, and Nordeep Kumi, and a special performance. So come back here at 4 o'clock after your 3 sessions. Quick logistics, the DuPont room, the breakout room is right next door. The other 3 breakout rooms are upstairs. You'll take the elevator. And put the disclaimer, all views expressed here today are those of the presenters and not necessarily those of Impact. If you have questions, please look for staff and volunteers. We all have a lanyard, and we are more than happy to help to make sure you have the best experience possible. And with that, I'm going to introduce someone that has been the heart of Impact for the past 3 years, whose work to grow the organization allows us to host events like this, where I hope there are some open seats, where we have sold-out spaces of more than 75 presenters and 400 people. So he has served as president of the South Asian Bar Association and recently took a leave of absence to fulfill Impact's mission and increase representation and run for office. So Neil Makhija, he won his primary election, now will be the first Asian American county commissioner in the state of Pennsylvania in history, representing one of the largest constituencies of nearly 1 million people. So please join me in welcoming Neil Makhija, our president of Indian American Impact Project.
Okay, please, everyone, give a round of applause for Sarah Shah for doing this amazing job leading on this summit. And And really the whole Impact team, it's incredible to think that just 3 years ago when I started as executive director, we didn't have a staff. And I was an independent contractor. We had this idea that it would be low key for the first year, just kind of get started and continue to build on the great work that are my predecessors, Gautam Raghavan and Aruna Miller, what they accomplished. And it's just become this extraordinary thing in just a few short years. And I want to start from the beginning to first thank our co-founders, Deepak Raj and Raj Goyal, who set this mission from the beginning that has helped us elect so many of the people and help train and all the people who stood up today. So please give them a round of applause. And our Impact Project board members, I see Vikas Raj, Vinay Thumalapalli, Priya Dayananda, Raj Goyal. They're all part of the 501c3. So today we're not talking about partisan politics. We're talking about civic engagement and the issues that reflect and are important to our community and the country. Please give them a round of applause as well. Thank you. So the theme for this year's summit is the next 100 years, and it alludes to the Bhagat Singh Thind Supreme Court case. So just by a show of hands, how many people are familiar with that case? How many people are not familiar with the case? I see a lot of people who didn't raise their hands at all. So you feel a little bit like I did. So I didn't want to admit that I actually knew nothing about the case, and I had gone to law school. I had gone to college. I'd studied constitutional law. It never came up. And it's an extraordinary thing to know that because of the importance and the consequence of that case. So for those of you who didn't know, the few who raised your hands, and perhaps the many who did not, the case decided that Indian Americans, South Asians, and at the same time a parallel case, Ozawa versus the United States, that Asian Americans broadly could not be naturalized and could not become citizens of the United States because we were not white. And at the time, there were people who had already naturalized, and they had their citizenship stripped from them. This was in 1923. And some had served, like Bhagat Singh Thind himself, had served in the army, had served the country, and then had their citizenship taken away. And all of the rights that came with that, of course, the right to vote, and simply the confidence that they could stay in the country and live their lives here. Now, it was in 1946 then that the Luce-Celler Act was passed and gave us a path to citizenship as people. But it was a negotiation, so in exchange for allowing that naturalization, a country cap of 100 people per year were put on several countries, including India, which was a net negative. So essentially, they said, okay, the few of you who are here can become citizens, but we don't want anyone else, because that would disrupt what we think of as America at the time. Now that changed in 1965, led by black leaders fighting for civil rights, for equity, for justice, who perhaps were not thinking of us directly at the time, but because they believed in those ideals, created a moment that led to the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which lifted those quotas and gave us a chance to live the dream in this country that many of our parents came in after and immigrated because it lifted those caps. So we would not be here if it were not for the work of those civil rights leaders. And we have a lot to owe and a lot to understand in our own history. So the reason we picked this theme is so that we as a community could better understand how we got to the place that we are today. Now, obviously, we have talked significantly about our elected representation. I think it's really important to hear from our leaders because that really is sort of the peak of citizenship. You know, we have the right to vote, we have the right to participate in democracy, but being an elected representative means you have the chance to lead, and it means you have the chance to actually guide the direction of the country. And we're going to hear from a few of them in just a moment. I want to say that when Impact first started, there were about 12 state legislators in the country who were Indian American, South Asian. There are now nearly 50, so we've more than quadrupled in just 6 to 8 years. And that is thanks to the extraordinary work that many of you have done, both in your own courage in running and those of you who have created the ecosystem of support. Now, please, thank you. One of those elected leaders, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, is a state representative who we'd like to highlight, the Michigan House Majority Whip, Ranjeev Puri. So Ranjeev, please go ahead. So those of you who don't know, Ranjeev was first elected to the Michigan State House in 2020, having worked for the Barack Obama presidential campaign and in the auto industry in Michigan. In just his second term, Representative Puri has championed and led the way on critically important pieces of legislation, including reproductive rights, supporting teachers and high-quality education, advancing the auto industry, and most importantly, recently, and if you know the data, which we've done about the issues that South Asians particularly care about, gun violence is actually very high on the list. Ranjeev Puri has led the way in Michigan to pass 3 common sense pieces of gun violence prevention legislation and deserves incredible praise for his work. So please thank him for that. And I'm going to welcome him. Is the House Majority Whip here? Ranjeev Puri, please welcome Ranjeev Puri. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Neil, for that wonderful introduction, and congratulations to our newest soon-to-be South Asian elected official. But what an honor to be amongst all of you. I want to thank Impact for yet another successful summit. This is becoming such a wonderful tradition. I'm starting to look forward to having to take a random day off in the middle of the week, fly to DC into a crowded ballroom with a bunch of brown people. It's almost becoming our Desi political homecoming of sorts, right? But on a serious note, it's always humbling to be in a room and rub shoulders with our community leaders from all over the country who are accomplishing so much. For those who may not know me, as Neil mentioned, my name is Ranjeev Puri. I am the House Majority Whip in Michigan. I'm unfortunately the only Indian American in the Michigan House, the youngest South Asian to ever serve in Michigan. And last year, we actually had our own Samosa caucus in Michigan. But my good friend, Congressman Thanedar, who will be with us later today, moved on to represent us here in D.C. And Representative Khanna actually stopped by Michigan a few months ago to help raise some awareness in the AAPI community. He suddenly left a bit bemused because I challenged him that my district has better Indian food than his district. And so I look forward to hosting all of you and the other reps in Michigan as well. But being the whip, a lot of people don't know what a whip does. The whip is part of the leadership team and is responsible for ensuring that we have the necessary number of votes required to pass any given bill. And in Michigan, we have a 0-vote majority. It's 56-54, meaning that every vote requires a lot of work. A lot of people who do know me wondered how someone like me could become the whip. The whip is often required to be stern, to strong arm, and have very uncomfortable conversations. I was often told, "You're way too nice to be the whip. How will you get upset when your colleagues will inevitably let you down? Indians are way too passive," I was told. I assured them that they have never been to a Punjabi wedding when the DJ cuts off the music too early. There is nothing passive about that. But I'm here to actually talk about the amazing work that's being done in Michigan. Yes, Michigan. I understand for you coastal elites, I understand the flyover state sentiment, but Michigan has a reputation. I get it. It's a gun-loving state. It has a strong hunting culture. But my signature annual event and fundraiser is my Bollywood Bash. And, assault rifles and samosas really don't mix. And so you see, as much as I love my federal counterparts, sometimes it's important for states to take work into our own hands. And Michigan has been on a roll. For those not familiar, last November, Michigan elected the first Dem trifecta in 40 years. And we have not taken this opportunity for granted. We are working hard to undo decades of damage. I've introduced packages ensuring holidays like Diwali, Eid, Vaisakhi become official state holidays. We've overturned right to work, repealed a ban on abortions, added civil rights protections, and also passed common sense gun reform. And yes, absolutely. Now, the gun reform issue is especially important to me. Gun violence, as we've noted, affects all communities, including our own. And it is the reason I ran for office. Because when my parents came to this country nearly 50 years ago, right, they could have sailed anywhere between New York City and LA, and they picked small town Wisconsin for whatever reason, and they helped establish the first ever Sikh Gurdwara in the state of Wisconsin. And so many years later, we left for Michigan, but in 2012, a white supremacist full of hatred, Islamophobia, bigotry opened fire at the Oak Creek Gurdwara, killing 6 souls. I watched as it went from a national story to almost completely out of the news in not even 24 hours. That story was my family's entire legacy. It's our community's story, and the American dream was ripped away for so many that very day. And I realized in that moment that we need to do more to elevate our voice. I became engaged locally in Michigan. I helped largely marginalized groups find that political voice. And so roughly 10 years later, by using that tragedy as a catalyst to run for office and to fight for change, I became the majority whip in a Democratic-controlled legislature. And after the horrific tragedy at Michigan State University earlier this year, I was proud to be the lead sponsor for the red flag laws. And these are laws which would possibly prevent future tragedies, just like the Oak Creek Gurdwara shooting or the Michigan State University shooting. And I'm so proud to announce that my bill was signed into law by our governor just a few weeks ago. And so we cannot let anyone tell us that our voice does not matter, because it absolutely matters, because the needs of our community are not largely different than broader society. But there are a few takeaways here. Many people don't understand that the need for our community civic engagement is to continue to expand. The need for a community to continue to craft those institutional connections to lift others that have historically been missing for us. For me, if it wasn't for Mayor Aftab Puriwal with his really good hair asking me to join student government 20 years ago in undergrad, I don't know if I then would have went on to work for President Obama, who then in turn talked me into running for office after the Oak Creek shooting. So we need to be engaged at every level, every election, every year. We need to empower our youth and the leaders of tomorrow to bring our community forward. I stand here in remembrance of the countless victims of senseless gun violence. And I urge all of us to continue to shed light on these horrible tragedies, for all of us to be a little bit like Michigan and fight hate with meaningful action. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to invite up our panel now. We have a really fantastic moderator, one of the founding board members of the Impact Project. She has served recently in the Biden-Harris administration and became the first South Asian president of NARAL, the nation's one of the most important reproductive rights organizations in the country, and that's Mini Timmaraju. Go ahead. Okay. Yep. Okay. And so our first panelist is someone who you all know is really a fantastic visionary and a congressman from one of the most prosperous districts in the country, in Silicon Valley, but has spent significant time talking about how we expand that prosperity to every part of the country, and that's Khanna. And our newest member of the Samosa Caucus from Michigan, Shri Thanedar. Come on in. And another member who you've known for quite some time, Raja Krishnamoorthi from Chicago. Please welcome him. Raja's ready with the dad jokes, I hope. Go ahead, Vinny.
Great. Are we on? Oh, I can't. Hi, Deepak. Great. Well, so nice to see everybody, and thank you for the warm and enthusiastic reception. I'm going to jump right in because we're a little bit off schedule, and I want to make sure you hear from these wonderful members of Congress. And I'm going to start with Representative Khanna. You talk about the new economic patriotism. And as Neil noted, you are from a very prosperous district. Can you talk about what that means in your vision and what you're leading on nationally?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Mini, for being the moderator, and just say what a big deal it is to have someone like Mini leading NARAL. I mean, that's an extraordinary moment for the Indian American community because it's one of the most important advocacy organizations in the country, especially when women's rights are under assault, one of the most important building blocks for the Democratic Party. It's no coincidence every Democratic politician tries to be in their good graces because they're the ones who win elections.
I wish.
And it's an honor to be here with Shri. You know, the thing I admire most about Shri is he did the impossible. He won an African-American majority district as an Indian American and connected and has deep connections there. He's going to be reelected for many years. Shri is doing incredible work. And an honor to be here with Raja Krishnamoorthi, who has done a phenomenal job leading us on the China Committee and has been a terrific leader on that and one of the most important roles in Congress. By a new economic, and just thank you to Impact. Thank you, Deepak, Neil, great election in Pennsylvania. Thank you for what you're doing. It keeps getting bigger every year. By new economic patriotism, I mean that this country made a big mistake for 40 years. We hollowed out our manufacturing. We hollowed out our production. We saw small towns lose their sense of identity and economic opportunity. I was reading recently about Canton, North Carolina, a town that had 4,400 people. Paper mill shuts down just a few months ago, 900 people out of work. And as a consequence of that, we have become both more polarized as a country, as some places have had extraordinary economic opportunity, other places feel left out, a legitimate anger. And we also realized we didn't make enough things in this country. We didn't make baby formula. We didn't make Tylenol. We didn't make computer chips. And so new economic patriotism is working towards revitalizing every part of this country, revitalizing production, having 100 new modern factories in 100 small towns, figuring out how we get government and the private sector working together to build the American economy again.
Thank you so much. And we've been seeing you a ton in the press driving this message home. So I encourage everybody to take a deeper look at your website and dig in and follow him on Twitter where you are prolific.
Thank you.
Representative Krishnamurthi, Representative Khanna alluded to this. You were appointed by Leader Jeffries to serve as ranking member of the House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, AKA the House China Committee. Can you explain to us what that committee is working on and its relevance to the Indian and South Asian American community?
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you to Impact. Man, this room is big. Yeah. And there are a lot of people here.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Impact and Neil and Deepak. Can you give yourselves a big round of applause? This is pretty amazing. I can't even see the end of the room from where I'm sitting. And thank you to Ro, who's been a terrific colleague of mine since we both came in together.
We did?
Yeah, 7 years ago. And Shri, welcome to the Samosa Caucus. And thank you to all of you. I am the ranking member of perhaps the committee with the longest name in Congress,
Yes.
perhaps as long as my name. And, essentially, what we're trying to do on this committee is it hasn't been done before, which is trying to deal with the challenge of competing with the Chinese Communist Party, engaging with the People's Republic of China, while at the same time safeguarding our interests, our values, and above all, deterring a war, discouraging aggression, making sure that we can keep the peace. And Ro and I were in the same room at the first meeting of this select committee, and at one end of the table, this is in the Speaker's office, is Kevin McCarthy. And what was really fascinating about that meeting was, to his left at the table was Hakeem Jeffries. And they jointly addressed our committee. And basically what McCarthy said was the following. He said, if you want to engage in partisanship, we've got committees for that. But if you want to get something done on perhaps one of the most important issues facing our country and our Congress, this is that committee. And so we've tried to work in a bipartisan fashion as much as possible to kind of chart our path forward on a number of fronts, including how do we enforce the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act to prevent the ongoing genocide that's happening against the Uyghur people in China. But also, how do we up our game as a country? How do we make sure that we fix what's wrong in America to make sure that we can upgrade the skills of our workforce, invest in technologies of the future, and then what's important to many of you as well as me is how do we attract the best and brightest people from around the world to come here to America? I'm one of a small number of naturalized citizens who are in Congress. I'm an immigrant myself. And you too? I was made in India. You too. And so I think that what we have on this committee is an opportunity to fix, perhaps, an institution that is just completely broken, which is our legal immigration system. I'll just briefly say this. There are 1.6 million people in the backlog for employment-based green cards alone, not counting all the other people who are in the family-based green card backlog and other backlogs. And so if we are going to nearshore and onshore those supply chains that are vital for competing with the Chinese Communist Party, we've got to onshore the talent to do that. Are you with me? We got to onshore the freaking talent. And so how do we retain and attract these people to stay here, grow our economy, and create the wealth and prosperity of the future and help, Rose District become even more prosperous? If we can't do that, we can't outcompete the CCP. So that's going to be a big part of my agenda on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And we have a question coming up later in the panel. I had one on immigration, but I think you addressed it. But I am going to follow up with you real quick if you have a minute to keep it succinct, if you don't mind. What do you see realistically as a possible path for legislation in this Congress to do what you're talking about?
It's a great point. I think that, and I'm going to be talking to Ro and Shri and others who care deeply about this subject, but I think that we may have a chance to get the attention of our colleagues on the other side on this CCP issue. It's almost like a Sputnik moment, if you will, for our country. How do we up our game in terms of fixing parts of our legal immigration system so that we can make sure we can fill the critical positions in the defense industrial sector, technologies of the future. In AI alone, 75% of graduate students are immigrants. 75%. So I think, for instance, there's something called the Emergency Green Card Backlogs Bill, which is sponsored by me and Larry Bouchon, a doctor from Indiana, a Republican from Indiana, and there we're trying to utilize unused green cards. There are tens of thousands of unused green cards that we'd like to use toward the backlog. Now, that's not going to solve the problem, but it's at least a baby step in the right direction, and we can start to build trust on the immigration issue to make more progress in other areas.
That's very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Representative Thanedar, you were previously a Michigan State Representative, and now you serve as a congressman for the very diverse city of Detroit. 6 months into the job, what have you learned about both your constituents and the inner workings of Congress that's surprising?
Well, again, Impact, Deepak, and Neil, thank you for having me. Many great job. As you can see, the two samosas here, rising stars in our party. And I am just honored to be here, delighted to be here. I was 24 years old, growing up in poverty. I was born in Belgaum in Karnataka. I speak Kannada, I speak Marathi fluently, I write Marathi fluently, and of course all the Hindi and Gujarati. So I was 24 years old. I needed to get a student visa. I got an admission for a PhD program in chemistry. And back then, you had to go 5 a.m. to the American embassy, stand outside in line, right, until your number is called. And my number was called at 11 o'clock, no water, no food, no bathroom, all the way waiting there till 11 a.m. Across the window is Virginia, who's asking me questions. I studied in Marathi medium, and I could hardly speak English at the time. And she's asking me all these questions, and I answered them as best as I could. And then she said, sorry, I can't give you a visa. And then she stamped no on my application. And I had never fainted in my life before, but I fell down to the ground, lost conscious, because this was the moment that I needed to change my life, my family's life. And when I woke up and I opened my eyes, Virginia came out of her window and standing next to me with a glass of water, but no visa. And then I could go as many times, apply as you know. But I had to give more documents. So I gave more documents, and they said, come back at 4 o'clock, we'll let you know. So second time, went there, they stamped my no again, her signature, Virginia's. Third time, I gave more documents about why I should be given a visa, F1 student visa. That's all I was asking for. And she rejected again for the third time. Fourth time, I got a letter from my professor. This is 1979. And he said that this kid, I need him because we're working on a thing called electric batteries. And he is an expert in this field, and I needed to do this research. So I thought that letter from an American professor will convince Virginia. Gave my papers in the morning, 4 o'clock, come back. I went there with a lot of expectations. Same thing again, she rejected my visa for the fourth time. Same stamp. The fifth time, about a month went by, I was unemployed. I needed to go to the US. And so I took the same paper Virginia rejected for the fourth time, took all that to the embassy, and they said, come back at 4 o'clock. And so I went back at 4. They said, where's your passport? And I said, I don't have one. Why do you need my passport? They said, we can't give you a visa if you don't have your passport. So I rushed home, get my passport, and I said, what, did Virginia change her mind? And they said, no, she has gone to America for vacation. And another counselor, Mr. Johnson, looked at your papers and he thought perfectly.
So I feel like this was great experience for your time in Congress.
Yes. So I come here, get my PhD, work as a chemist, run small businesses, and and achieve my American dream. And I look around in Michigan, especially 25% of my district under poverty. Sorry, Raja. Mine is maybe one of the.
C-SPAN says the same thing.
It's the most prosperous district to one of the poorest.
Most prosperous district to
one of the poorest.
To a district which is 25% below poverty.
Wow.
I see the American dream not accessible to many people. And it felt at that time, life is not about accumulating wealth. So I sell my business. I was profit sharing with my employees all the time. I took some of the money, gave it to all of my employees from the sale. And I said, if I can run a company, then I can run a state. And so I ran for governor of Michigan. Unfortunately, not many people thought so. I lost that election. I got about 200,000 votes in that election, but I lost that. I didn't want to go back to business world, so I stayed and became a state rep with some great people. You heard Puri and Ayash here, my colleagues from Michigan. We flipped the Michigan House. I served in the minority there. We worked hard to flip the Michigan House, which we did.
Michigan now has a trifecta, Democratic trifecta.
We flipped the Michigan Senate first time in 40 years, and there's so much Michigan legislature had done, the governor has done. So unfortunately, I came from a minority that just became a majority to a majority that became a minority in U.S. Congress. But I'm learning a lot. It's really getting to know people, working with people, getting things done across the aisle. I know, being a business person, I want to make deals. I want to, work across the aisle, get things done. And that's really what I'm focusing on. We just had a bipartisan bill about creating apprenticeships, helping small businesses, getting funding, working on the red tape. We're able to do across the aisle and get things done. My committees are small business and homeland security. So from the time of Virginia not able to enter the country, now I am a ranking member of a committee that looks after America's borders and making sure America's borders are safe.
That is the American dream.
Only in America this is possible. From a person who couldn't even get in to be now I'm going to the America's borders and looking at the migrations, and we are working on more sane policy in dealing with migration for our country. Anyway, Bram, I'm excited to be here, and I'm learning a lot from these great heroes.
Well, thank you.
So I'm going to flip it. So I want you to all take a moment to enjoy the bipartisanship, because I'm about to flip it to some topics that are also only in America and are extremely problematic. Okay, I've got a couple of questions here on abortion rights, gun violence, and climate change. I'm going to wrap them into one because I know we don't have a ton of time, and I want to hear the way that when I talk about it at NARAL in the press is we have fundamental freedoms at stake. What do all three of those issues have in common? The majority of Americans support substantive change in those issues, right? But we can't get anything done in this Congress. And in many capitals and many state legislatures, we can't. Because of an erosion of our democracy, our free and unfettered access to the ballot. So I want to ask each of you to comment. You can pick one of these topics. All of you have been champions in all of these values, and I deeply appreciate it, and so do NARAL's 4 million members. But I want you to talk about what you're working on to address gun violence, abortion rights, climate change, and or our fundamental of democracy, which is really undergirding all of these threats. And I'll start with Ro.
Well, the first thing we have to do is call out the Supreme Court as
you.
having a legitimacy of crisis. These are not people to be respected in black robes with elite education. These are political hacks who often got their positions by running campaigns. They're no smarter than anyone. They're no more pedigreed than anyone. And there are times in our country's history when Lincoln called out an illegitimate court, when FDR called out an illegitimate court. And what you have right now is a court that has lost the legitimacy and trust of the American people. And that's why I have availed and I have called for term limits for these Supreme Court justices. The idea that they should be making decisions controlling women's bodies in 2023, when some of them were appointed 40 years ago, is offensive to any idea of democracy.
And several of them lied.
And some of them have lied, and there need to be hearings about those. And so I guess I would just say two things, because we've got very active people here, very respected folks here. You're all active in your communities. We need a mobilization that is much more explicit and harsh in calling out the Supreme Court.
Yep.
We need to campaign explicitly against the Supreme Court. We should get rid of the niceties in how we are talking about these issues when fundamental rights are at stake. And we need to be campaigning at the very least on term limits for these justices and hearings for these justices. And if we do that, I think the American people will be with us and we will start to win.
Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more, and we just joined several national court reform campaigns, and we're going to be doing a lot around the anniversary of the Dobbs decision coming up. The week that we also expect a lot of other deeply problematic Supreme Court decisions to come out on issues like affirmative action, immigration, and more. So thank you so much. Representative Thanedar.
Well, the mass shootings that, we had 300 or so mass shootings, with something every other day, every day. We see this across America. And, America's obsession with guns. is deeply troubling. Nowhere else in the world we see this kind of obsession, and we can't live like this anymore. We can't live like this anymore. We need to have red flag laws. We need to ensure, when our children, my grandchildren, go to school, we want to make sure they come home safe. We want to live in a society where we don't have to be fearing about our lives, going to a mall, going to a grocery store. And so we need continue to insist on strong gun safety laws. Common sense gun safety is essential. Red flag laws on a national basis is essential that we need to fight for and ensure that we don't live in this fear. We raise our families, we raise our children in a safer environment. Now we need to do everything possible from a legal point of view. We also need to look at the mental health crisis in this. Yes, we absolutely must ban. Nobody needs those military-style assault weapons, and we must absolutely ban them. And the issue of mental health, mental health need to be on par with physical health. And I am a big proponent of Medicare for all, a single-payer health care system. And rich nations such as ours must provide health care to all citizens regardless of their financial ability. No one should have to worry about their health and getting into a major health crisis and which will drive them bankrupt. So, single-payer health care is absolutely essential that we need to focus on. Mental health services in schools. I've seen kids waiting for weeks and months to get an appointment with a psychological counselor. And that is where a lot of times mental health manifests itself in the 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and we need to really address. Otherwise, we're going to deal with another huge pandemic, and that will be mental health, and we need to really address both of these issues. That's what I'm focusing on.
Thank you so much. And I just want to point out, I just saw our friends from Save Texas, and some of you are in Allen, Texas, where we just had a terrible mass shooting. Mm-hmm. And I know you've been on the front line in a tough red state advocating for gun violence prevention, so thank you. Representative Krishnamoorthi.
I think it's time we save the planet. At this point, climate change is not just a theoretical issue. It's causing incredible weather patterns that we haven't seen. We're seeing once in 100-year floods happening almost every year in some places. We're seeing incredible other weather events beset our country. And to that end, I believe we have to do everything we can to implement the Inflation Reduction Act. This is a landmark bill that got obviously signed into law by President Biden. And I think it represents, based on what my constituents say, what the vast majority of Americans want. They want us to implement an agenda of renewable energy, combined with doing whatever we can to kind of mitigate what's happening on the fossil fuel front. To that end, I helped to found the Bipartisan Solar Caucus in Congress. Yeah, go solar. I founded it with a guy named Ralph Norman. We couldn't be more different. Ralph Norman is a member of the Freedom Caucus. I'm not. Ralph Norman is a conservative Republican. I'm not. And as I like to say, his name is Ralph. I'm not a Ralph. And yet, what's very interesting is that he got elected in a special election from South Carolina about 4 years ago. And I went up to him and just, congratulated him on his special election. And immediately he started talking about solar. And it turns out that he has been a huge solar project developer in South Carolina. And I said, why did you become such a proponent of solar? And he said, I wanted to cut the cord from our utilities. I believe in freedom and independence from our utilities. So I said, go freedom and independence. Whatever it takes. We have to do whatever it takes to get folks on the other side bought into this agenda for the sake of our planet. You know, at the end of the day, this is what Ro and Shri and I are trying to do, is we're trying to pursue an agenda of team normal. Team normal. Team normal believes in, you know, a Supreme Court that doesn't all of a sudden overturn reproductive freedoms overnight. Team normal believes in common sense gun control, or trying to put a climate agenda in place that is both friendly to the economy and to the planet, and we're battling Team Extreme every day.
Yes.
Team Extreme is coming after us. And so I believe today is D-Day. D-Day obviously marks the anniversary of storming the shores of Normandy in World War II. But I believe D-Day for us today is Democracy Day. It has to be the day that today we lift up our voices in favor of what the vast majority of the American people want and what the They See people want. They See Day, that's D-Day. And that's what we have to pursue today coming out of this conference. All of these issues are what the American people urgently need.
I really appreciate that. And I was just given a 2-minute warning. So that doesn't give me time to ask everybody to wrap up, but I want to make one editorial comment. I didn't get a question about LGBTQ plus rights, but I was happy to catch part of your panel, They See Rainbow and Allies. And I want to make an editorial comment about, and I think y'all are going to get this, all kinfolk ain't skin folk, as they say where I'm from in Texas, right? We've got some prominent candidates for president who might look like us, but do not represent our values. I'm specifically talking about certain candidate Nikki Namrata Haley and her comments about trans brothers and sisters. They are unacceptable, and it is our job, and I know these members of Congress agree with me, to stand up for what's right and fight back and not accept this hate. So being here at Impact isn't just about running for office and supporting each other. It's about pushing back, even when the people who are on the other side of the extremist debate and our democracy look like us. So I just want to give these members of Congress a round of applause.
Thank you.
I want to thank them for all. It's really hard work being in the minority in this Congress, but guess what? We're only 4 seats short. They're not going to be in the minority for long, thanks to all of you.
Four counting George Santos.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
3, not
So
counting
so
Santos.
guess what? Guess what? We got this. And when we do this again, they're going to be in the House majority, and we're going to be talking about bigger, bolder things that we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Impact. All right, want to go talk to the boss? I think we're talking to the boss.
Let's give him one more round of applause. All right, so Minnie, I think, summed it up beautifully. There is a lot of work for us to do. So right now, we are going to be transitioning to a series of 3 breakouts. If we could get those queued up on the slides. Again, the program is in your tote bag, or ask one of us with a lanyard for help. But we have a lot of fantastic sessions the next 3 hours. Again, DuPont is on the right. The other 3 breakouts are upstairs. You can choose your own session. There will be snacks later in the afternoon. We will all come back here at 4 o'clock for our closing. Also, one more plug. If you have not stopped by Impact Project, we are honored this year to spotlight a community DC-based organization, Ashiana, that is doing tremendous work to end gender violence in our community. So please join us in supporting them. They are outside with a lot of fantastic resources. So thank you. Enjoy your afternoon. We'll see you here at 4 o'clock.